Okay, everybody, welcome back from lunch. And I'm just going to hand over to Kirsty for our next item, which is our workshop on the future for local government review.
Thank you, Liz. So first of all, I'd just like to begin by offering apologies on behalf of Gary, who, as you know, has been leading work at a regional level, sub-regional level, and also inputting to the work of Taituara at a national level. So Gary's on leave and entrusted this to me. The purpose of the workshop today is to provide you with a high-level overview as to where we're at and our suggested way forward to gather feedback from you that will then inform the preparation of a WAIPA specific response to the Future for Local Government Review panel. Please stop me and ask questions as we go along. I'll do my best to answer them, but I can't guarantee I've got all of the answers. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, we're just going to do a little bit of a step back to do a recap of the 5 key shifts that were in the interim report that was issued in 2021, to provide an overview of the key messages from the draft report issued in late 2022 and for which responses are due by the end of this month, to then talk about the work that is underway at a regional level, to canvass with you, I guess, the staff recommendation as to our WAIPA specific approach and an outline as to the time frame. So just with regard to the 5 key shifts that were in the interim report issued in September 2021, you're well familiar with these. These set out broad direction and they informed questions that were put by the panel as they commenced engagement with councils and other interested organisations and entities in 2022. You'll recall when we met with 2 of the panel members in March 2022 that we actually framed our presentation around these 5 key shifts. And we also discussed these in detail when we had our elected member executive team offsite as part of your induction program in November last year. With regard to the draft report, you've seen that was provided to you as part of your induction program. It was issued in October 2022, as I mentioned a short time ago. Feedback is due by the 28th of February. There are 3 principles that underpin the report. Recognising the role of local government in our relationships, connection to our local communities, and they really focus on the role of local government as territorial authorities and district councils as something that comes through quite clearly, strongly through the report. This principle of subsidiarity, which is the level of government closest to the affected communities. You're aware that the Waikato councils have engaged Polis and Becca to do some work in this space, and Polis have, I guess, a different interpretation of what that principle is. They talk about applying effort and resources to where they can have the greatest effect. So I guess the concept is the same, but just a slightly different lens on it. And then the process for allocating roles and functions underpinned by Te Ao Māori values. So this is the Māori worldview with, I guess, 3 component parts to that being te reo, the language, tikanga Māori, so this is the protocols and custom, and then te tiriti or Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi. Are there any questions on that slide before we move on? No. This slide and the next one just provide bullet points as to the key themes that emerge from the report, and they're essentially an extension of those 5 key shifts. So in terms, I'm not proposing to go through these in any great detail. The citizen-led democracy, that could be, by way of example, community engagement through meetings such as LTP consultation. It could be citizens' assembly, referenda, something that you've heard from Peter McKinley on previously. a Tiriti-based partnership between Māori and local government. So this is really focused on those principles of rangatiratanga and kāwanatanga, so sovereignty and governorship. And then that fourth bullet point there, local government is a champion and activator of wellbeing. So really focusing on councils as that in that placemaker space, having that connection or connector to community. Also a systems convener and networker. So bringing together different organisations, whether that be central government level, community organisations and the wider community. And then this concept of an anchor institution, which is really, I guess, long-term enduring relationships, again, very much focused on place. So examples of anchor institutions include universities, councils, hospitals, where organisations partner for the collective good. Any questions on that slide? So, yep, absolutely.
These are very aspirational, but they need to also consider the funding. This is the key issue that I keep raising here, is that it's great to talk about well-being, but do we have a place in the health system? Do we have a place in the education system? These are all part of well-being. Do we have a really good say over our voting systems? This just really concerns me, because the government just puts these aspirational things out, but they do not fund it. And we're asking a proportion of our society to fund it, who are the ratepayers. And they are not the whole society. So we are left with a situation that we are going to be accountable for that. I just want to raise it.
And there on the next slide, there is a bullet point which talks about funding and financing. And but you raise a valid point, and I guess this is really why this is provided to us as an opportunity to provide feedback. And you know, that phrase in terms of, do we want to be the architect of our future, or do we want to sit back and let what happens happen to us? I think Claire, you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Lou said. It's related to that stronger relationship as well. Like if we were able to get those, I suppose that dialogue or be an active participant in those networks of those central government agencies that actually operate in Waikato, we might get a better outcome too. Yeah. But I was going to talk about the Tiriti-based partnership, because you know, since this report has been issued, we've had a polarization about co-governance and what it actually means. And I think that, but perhaps we need to mention in our feedback that this needs to be gone into a lot more detail in how it works in practicality. You know, because the Tiriti talks about partnership, doesn't talk about absolutely equal partnership and everything, you know. And like, I disagree with the co-governance model used for Three Waters. I do not see why Māori should have such a strong, like they hold the veto card, you know, for stuff to do with water infrastructure that's actually about delivering water. It's not about managing the resource, you know. And so we've got to have more in-depth conversations about it.
So with regards to the representative democracy, this is quite wide in its scope. In the report, it speaks about better more remuneration and support for better representation of our approach to the reform. Sure about their systems stewardship and support. So this is around the guidance and support that is provided to council for at the moment, that's provided to the Minister of Local Government. And then there's roles that are played by the title item. So looking at that and the need for it to be adaptable to our changing environment. Any questions or comments? No, sure. I think a presentation. There's three models that are provided for within the really they're provided to prompt feedback from three. Over to you as to whether you wish to provide specific feedback, but I think maybe just come to it now and come back to it as we talk through the approach and simply overlap that feedback that would like to be raised. Model is based on a unitary approach where the council is together, bringing together territorial authorities, and then we have a number of laws, a significant number of representatives. As we engage with our communities, one of the things that we do is was supports what we've seen with the rest of the country, very much top down and we keep that bottom up is back into the village.
Oh, sorry, no.
If we were looking at that in terms of our area, district, region, perception, what would our region be? Are we talking about the whole of the Waikato, going Taupo, Coromandel, Ngaruahi, Raglan, that whole area across the middle? Is that the kind of region that we'd be talking about?
That is a concept, yes. So, I mean, we are within the Waikato region. It does extend, quite some distance in terms of the geographical boundaries. And we know ourselves that within WAIPA district, we don't have one uniform community. We're made up of a collection of communities. So that then becomes multiplied as you extend across the Waikato region, where we have inland territorial authority jurisdictions, we have coastal, and just that we've seen even in the last week with the weather event, the impact and how that varies across our region. So then just turning to the next slide, essentially this is akin to what we have, where we have local and regional councils with separate governance. And then the third model is a combined council where they'd have a combined mayor elected at the election and then representation from each of the local councils that make up that combined authority. And I think in the report it's sort of suggesting that your local council representative to the combined authority would likely be your mayor or a senior elected member.
And then the question is on that one, how small would the local areas be? Would we be talking about, say, the Cambridge area representing Te Awamutu-based area, Taupo, etc. Then, so kind of more localizing than what we have now.
So they're not coming up with a suggestion in that regard. I think they're keen to hear from the communities and organisations, what we would be supportive of or not. I can't imagine myself that it would go down into that smaller, community level. But
yeah, in the UK, they've got, like the place that I come from, Bishop Auckland, 60,000. It's got its own council. So the UK system has gone more towards that localism than where we are now.
I guess we just need to also consider what's happening, you know, and at a wider level in terms of the central government reform, and that is, you know, bringing things together rather than, you know, regionalisation and centralisation.
But
what are your thoughts on that?
If you compare 2 and 3, so 2 is the kind of status quo. So what difference is 3 unless it becomes more localised in terms of the smaller area for councils? And I would suggest that that might be what they get to make it more localist than what it is currently.
There would also be that that direct voice from your local council as part of that wider combined entity. But that's a valid point, so I'll note that down. So just moving now to a regionally aligned response. So Gary has briefed you previously around the work that has been led by CoLab and Waikato Regional Council, supported by Polis and Becca, looking at how we can work effectively across the Waikato region and what particular areas we might focus on, being those that are of strategic importance to us at a regional level. So that work is underway. Some of you attended the induction session that was put on for councils hosted by CoLab, and there was mention there specifically in relation to transitioning to a low emissions economy, and also around that growth, leveraging opportunities with respect to growth.
Say something there, Kirsty. So yeah, I attended that induction thing, but something that came out of that is like they're really looking forward, like looking ahead to what the new political climate may be, and that was before Jacinda resigned. But actually they, you know, this was Kieran actually, he didn't say it in the public session. They're seeing more city deals being done. Okay, and you can see why, because it's all about reducing emissions and growth. And of course, that's going to be, you know, concentrated in metro areas. So they're the ones that are going to pitch to central government for deals. And you've seen some of the deals come through already, you know, about infrastructure stuff. So I do wonder what's in it for us, and whether or not we should be saying, well, we're going to align ourselves with the provincial councils and see what we can get, because we can't rely on, can we rely on being in with Hamilton, I guess, you know? Yeah, I was a bit disappointed about it. I mean, if you read commentary overseas about doing deals, it's not good long term for communities, because it's sort of a knee-jerk reaction to a specific need, and it doesn't look at, you know, your broader values in your community and things like that. So I'd be quite disappointed if that happened, but I'm just saying that's probably going to be on the cards. Yeah.
Thanks, Claire. So just to note that that piece of work is continuing. So there's work being done on the preparation of the triennium agreement that will come through to the mayoral forum. So we'll park that. And then specific in terms of the response to the Future for Local Government review draft report. So staff from across the Waikato region councils came together at the end of January, and it really was to drill down into what are those areas of the report that we could focus on at a regional level. And look, I guess we didn't have chief executives in the room, so it was another group of staff. But kind of where we landed was, I guess, general agreement in principle to some high level themes. And the thinking was that it could be challenging to get consensus given the timeframes on a combined submission. So rather, there was discussion around agreeing to these, or supporting in principle, these high level principles that then could be pulled into individual council submissions, and they might form the front end of our response, and talk about, you know, how we work collaboratively across the Waikato region. So in terms of those, they are at a high level, and I don't anticipate that there'd be anything there that you wouldn't agree with. You know, already we are working regionally and sub-regionally. There are some some successful forums and entities that we are part of, such as Future Proof, such as a CoLab, RATA. So there's already working, collaborative working that has been occurring. There was a strong feeling that rather than having these discrete central, regional, local government responses, and actually it's a continuum, and that we needed to look at this as a system. So this review's focused on local government, but actually you can't have local government without central government, and we actually needed to look at the system as a whole. And so I think that that's something that when I've gone through and reread the report over the weekend, that I think we really need to highlight.
And it's at that top level where we need to really, in some aspects, have cross-party policy making, so we don't get a change every 3 or every 6 or every 9 years that throws everything out of the window. So we really need to get that consistency of policy coming on a cross-party basis in many aspects.
Yeah, I'd like to back Councillor Gordon on that. It was the same concern, is that we do have a situation where the Minister for Local Government changes, and often changes even during an electoral term, and they can change their policies and philosophies. One of the things about cooperation and coordination, have a look at your civil defence operation, and that is another great area of cooperation. We actually operate from Thames right down through Taupo, right down, and within our own civil defence group, we're operating at this time with Otaronga and Waitomo. So we do have this infrastructure in place, and it works very well. But an overview of it, it is actually controlled by the Joint Committee representing all of the councils, rather than having government representation on it. So I will resist that a little.
And then just the final bullet point in that slide relates to funding. So very much feeling in the room that there is the opportunity for funding to be allocated regionally, and then for that to be allocated according to priority, again, at a regional level. So just to check in with you whether there is a general level of comfort to those principles that I have outlined there on that slide.
Yeah, look, absolutely there is. But at the bottom of all this, what it really comes down to is, after this review, what will local government actually be doing? And we may or may not be seeing a big chunk of the infrastructure role of local government going to WSEs. And the next thing, if it is regional, would probably be roading. I mean, again, you stand back and it actually makes pretty good sense for that to be regional, as long as the local input is listened to and forms part of the overall plan. But regionally, you can be more effective with allocating, jobs and contractors and all the rest of it. And I think that if that came about, then where Roger's coming from could make a lot of sense, that we actually have smaller, more local government. But again, it just depends on the role, what it is that local government actually does.
I actually don't think that it says funding needs to be effective and allocated appropriately. I think we've got to question some of the funding decisions that we've seen. I mean, the better off funding. It's difficult to find historic logic for that better off funding pool to have been thrown out there, really, isn't it? I know that we benefited from it, but it's just to say, well, let's put this money here and let's distribute it on a whim. I know it's a carrot. So I mean that's a challenge with that form of funding, isn't it?
I was going
Yeah.
to say we were calling it a bribe, weren't we? Yeah. But look, it is, you know, quite clear. Mm.
So Kirsty, like, I don't object to those bullet points, but what I'm really concerned about is the outcome of this process is a very measured response from individual councils for something that needs a lot of passion and I suppose oomph behind it to say, this is what we need it now, because at the moment, like this review has had a complete carte blanche, really. What do you want to do, but in actual fact it all depends on what central government are willing to give us, and they have not said what that would be. Now, like, let's look at that funding thing. Local government has said for quite a few years they deserve to have GST, particularly on growth, and others have said a proportion for visitors as well. I think we need to be saying that in black and white. I'm just really worried that this is kind of being like a committee process, and in the end it's going to be so insipid that it's not going to generate any meaningful response from central government.
So we finish up with a camel with 5 humps.
Yeah, and they're just going to file it away in a drawer, So in fact, I really think we should be either using C4LD or LGNZ to say, this is what we need, and in fact, if you don't give it to us, we're not going to cooperate on 3 waters.
I thought we'd already said that.
We are, like, we shouldn't be answering any information requests or anything like that. So I mean, I just think we've got to say, like, this is our future. We've really got to
Be driving it. I think
really,
it feels the other way around.
Enough to just do a nice, polite little submission about it.
So, okay, great point. And I'm aware that Taituara are pulling together a submission, having undertaken a roadshow through different parts of the country to get feedback from staff and elected members. So just moving on to the next slide, which is just a continuation of those points of what was, I guess, those general principles that were discussed and agreed with the staff, and then we'll talk to WAIPA specifically. So already, I mentioned this earlier, strong models already in place, and how can we maximise those to be most effective, but also how can they then be replicated at a national level, and Future Proof is a great example of that. Rather than getting fixated on a particular model as to what this looks like, actually focusing initially on what it is that each of us are going to be doing. And then that drives the model off that follows. The next bullet point there is really that need to work effectively at regional, sub-regional and local levels, and for it to be flexible. We don't all, as I mentioned earlier, our communities aren't uniform. It's not a case of one size fits all, and well-being means different things to different communities. That's a really important point to make. There was discussion around having something akin to a Waikato policy office. They have that operating in Auckland. We've seen that covered off in media in the past week. And I guess we thought, the regional public commissioner and that role, I guess that the issue with that is that they've been working for here part-time, and just that resourcing. So that's something that we're keen to explore at a regional level. And just moving into WAIPA specifically. So Gary has shared with you that there were conversations at the Taituara conference with members of the panel. They are keen to hear from WAIPA specifically around the work that we're doing to develop our community spatial plan. We've reached out to them to meet with those 2 members, and one of the recommendations is that we actually pursue that they're going to be inundated with written responses. So how can we have the most impact, and really think there's nothing better than getting in front of people face to face. So for us, really using Ahuaki, the spatial plan, as the vehicle to speak to each of those key themes that I highlighted for you at the beginning. Because essentially it covers off all of those, places at the heart of our community well-being, and obviously Ahuaki is founded on place. It will drive everything that we do, so that it will provide the direction in terms of our future planning, but also our prioritisation for our communities, and then how that is transitioned back into how we deliver on projects, initiatives, projects of work, whether that be council wholly of itself, or whether that's us working in partnership with mana whenua and iwi, central government organisations, community groups.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
Because my understanding of the proposed new RMA legislation is that there's an emphasis on regional spatial planning. And I agree totally with our WAIPA spatial plan, but going down in the future, my perception is that will be subsumed within the regional spatial plan, and therefore will we not lose control on that, because it will then become a regional policy statement and taken out of our hands.
And so I think that's something that has been highlighted through our response in terms of that top-down, bottom-up. I mean, as you know, questions were asked right at the beginning of the process in developing Ahuaki as to, why are we doing this now when we've got RMA reform, a Spatial Planning Act on its way? And our response to that was that we wanted to get ahead of the game and have that connection with local WAIPA communities to ensure that we were clear on what the aspirations are for our communities across WAIPA, to be able to then advocate that and ensure that it's incorporated within regional spatial strategy. But you raise a valid point, Roger, and that's something that I think we need to reiterate within this submission.
Because it's got a real relevance in terms of this, because it's another function that's taken away from what our existing role is as a council. So we lose waters, we lose the district plan, we lose the spatial plan. So then, the localism is really the well-being, and that we might not have that much control on it.
So just sorry, the bottom point there was talking about benchmarking for partnering with mana whenua and iwi, and I guess that's the point that's replicated over here, that as mentioned in the previous workshop, we haven't connected with community on a scale that we are through Ahuaki, so it provides that opportunity to connect directly with our community and community groups. We can enhance engagement and connection moving forward by looking at the implementation opportunities that are provided through Ahuaki to inform future planning, to inform our prioritisation through future LTPs and funding efforts, and strengthen a relationship with central government organisations. So we've been connecting with Ministry of Education, Waka Kotahi, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Kāinga Ora, so to grow those relationships and to ensure that the communication is two-way, that we are feeding into, as well as them, providing us with direction and imposing requirements.
But being cynical, that's an assumption that the LTP will still be there in the future, in whatever form.
So I think we probably need to widen that out into whatever its successor is. But essentially the point that I made right at the beginning is that we believe that Ahuaki is the exemplar and speaks to each of the themes that have been highlighted in the report. So our staff recommendation is that our feedback focuses on that. That's also what we've heard from panel members that they wish to hear from us on. So to talk through the process of development, engagement and implementation. So just in terms of the timing and what's proposed, a really tight time frame. So looking to have a draft submission prepared on or about Monday of next week, to then email out to you and asking for email feedback by the end of next week, to then be incorporated into a formal report and draft submission to come to council for endorsement on the 28th, being the same day that feedback is due with the panel. So really tight. Happy to have conversations. There may be some flex in terms of the draft submission and getting that to governance. They may be happy to receive the report on deadline and possibly the submission definitely before the agenda goes out, but maybe there may be some flexibility there. But that is what we're working to. So keen to hear from you as to whether you think that that is a reasonable response, or whether there's anything that you think we need to do differently in terms of that plan presented.
Good. Just because I have difficulty printing off a section of this, could you send us your PowerPoint as a separate document?
I can send that as a document, yes, by email.
No, thank you.
Okay, everyone happy? Yep.
Whose recommendations were the timings there for Monday and for feedback and things like that? Is it
Whose recommendations?
the timeframes there?
They're mine.
Oh, right.
Because
okay.
I'm going to be pulling together the submission, and I guess there's a limited opportunity to do that. We've just, as you know, our hierarchy events start this week. So that is quite a big demand on time and work and personal time. So that's what's going to be workable. And it's really driven by that 28th of February end date, and also the time requirements for presenting a report to council for endorsement. Alternatively, we could look to do that retrospectively, but it's still critical that there is elected member feedback into this before it's presented. So, another option could be that the Chief Executive and Mayor exercise delegated authority, and then it's reported back retrospectively. But I guess I've gone with a best practice approach here.
Thank you, Kirsty. Appreciate that. Oh, good. We'll get that feedback. Okay, we're going to now go into public excluded. So we're going to stop the live stream.